Hey everybody, welcome back to the Jaywalker. Today, Ghost Story for Saturday, episode number 9, Family Stories, or Oh, he just makes me so mad. So today, we're talking some family stories, stories about other members of my family, and we talked a little bit about me. A little bit of experiences with my kids today, kind of branching out a little bit and giving you some stories from my grandparents. So first off, we'll start with my maternal grandmother, who is still alive. She is 88 and has dementia, Alzheimer's to be more specific. And it seems, having worked in memory care and having dealt with those who are aged, and even some who are getting ready to cross that line themselves, a lot of times I have seen that they have visitors. And my grandmother, while not quite ready to cut ties and head to the other side, has had a number of visitors come and talk to her. A lot of the stories that I've heard about these visitors have come from my mom. I've seen, a couple of times as we visited. She lives with my mom. She lives with my mom, and as we visited, we've seen a few of those connections. So the first story came from my mother, and there was one night in particular, my grandmother was having kind of a restless night, and she'd been having visitors and having conversations with these visitors. And there was one night that this one conversation woke her up, and she was awake, and she was not very happy. She was angry. She was, just very worked up. And as my mom came in to talk with her and figure out what was going on, she's like, "Hey, what's going on, Mom?" Oh. And my grandmother's response, while funny, was also slightly disturbing. And my grandmother said, "Oh, he just makes me so mad." And my mother pressed for a little bit more information. "Well, who's that?" And unfortunately, my grandmother, with her dementia, simply said, I can't remember." And just a few minutes later, she was calmed down enough to go back to sleep. But, to know that there was people coming through and visiting her, that, most of the time there's not issues, but some that were not making her very happy. And then second little story came just within the last couple of months. There was a few nights in a row where my mother talked about Grandma having a visitor, possibly multiples, and this one particular night, or over a few nights, and she was actually almost very happy sounding or seeming as she was having little talks with this visitor. And she couldn't remember who it was, but we found out that right about this time, this happened right at the beginning of July, that this particular visitor came in, and she seemed very, very happy to see them. And we found out a month ago or so, at time of filming this, that my uncle, who had passed, he was homeless and did check in fairly often, but no one had heard from him for about a month and a half. And it just happened to be since the beginning of July that anybody had heard anything from him for sure, and we found out that he had passed away, and they found him up near his camp, and they figured that he had most likely passed away at the beginning of July when my grandmother was having this visit. So we kind of feel, as I've kind of theorized before, a lot of times people stay around for a little while, make sure everything's okay, and I kind of believe that with my uncle as well. So next couple of stories here, we're going to do 2 more stories, and we'll we'll be finished with today's walk. But now we're going to switch over to my father's parents, who have both passed. First story was a story that my grandfather related to me a number of years ago, and it was while my great-grandfather was getting ready to pass, and I think it was probably just a couple of weeks before that happened, but my grandmother had taken my great-grandmother out to get her hair set. Cute little old lady with old lady hair, 90 years old, so my grandmother would take her out to get her hair set once a week. And my grandfather, this particular day, was hanging out with my great-grandfather. And as they're sitting in the kitchen, I believe it was, talking, my great-grandfather, in kind of a lull in the conversation, stops and looks over in the corner and says, "Jay," my grandfather's name was Jay, says, "Jay, who's that man standing over in the corner?" My grandfather, knowing that they were alone, still looked over towards the indicated corner. No one there. And just told my great-grandfather, "Oh, Dad, it's probably just someone watching over you, waiting to take you home." Okay. And that was kind of the end of that conversation. Like I mentioned, my great-grandfather passed not too long after that. So my last story, I want to talk about just my grandparents in particular. They were married for 71 years. They've both passed away. But as I mentioned, they'd been married for 71 years. They were amazing people, and they were super great together, super sweet. And so my grandfather passed away first. And at the time that they passed, they were living in an assisted living center. Both of them were having memory issues. My grandpa was slipping into some dementia. My grandmother was more just going into senility, and her own words, she was getting old and funny, which she was, and it was absolutely, completely like her to describe it that way, and she really was. And as I mentioned, my grandpa passed away first, and my grandmother, in her old and funny state, I don't know if she necessarily completely understood that Grandpa had passed, or couldn't accept it, didn't want to accept it. But I also think, we'll get to this in a second, but they had a talk. My grandpa didn't talk much, and by the end, and so my grandpa passed away at the beginning of November in 2017, and my grandmother knew something was wrong, but as I mentioned, how much she was or wanted to understand at that point was a little tough to see, but she had come out and hey, something is wrong with Jay. She understood something was wrong, but that was it. And I think at that point, this is kind of where draw some conjecture and have to theorize a little bit, but I kind of think that because my own belief that, first off, I think that people, when they pass occasionally, sometimes often, their spirit, their essence hangs around to make sure everything is okay for a while till, things get settled. I think they hang around, and I also think that, the spirit world, the place where that essence, that spirit, that ghost goes to, and why we don't see them, understand them, comprehend that they're here. They're here, but they're on a different plane. But they're here, and that's why they're able to come back and visit and see, and sometimes communicate, sometimes, give us experiences and interact with us. So I think that my grandfather, as he passed, either while he was, able to speak, maybe, he had a moment of clarity, a moment of able to speak, talked with her, or just as he passed, when she was able to speak more spirit to spirit, as it were, or, kind of communicate that way. I think he may have told her, hey, when it's time, I've got to go away, I've got to go on a trip, but I'll come back for you. I'll come and get you. And about 6 weeks after she passed, or after Grandpa passed, so it was the middle to the end of December, my grandmother saw my grandfather. Jay's here. He's there. And she would say that, and the people who worked at the assisted living were like, Jan, Jay's gone away, remember? No, he's here. He's back for me. It's time for me to go. He's back for me. I can go now. And within just a couple of weeks of my grandfather coming for her, my grandmother declined and passed away. Going to the other side with a man she loved for so long. Leave you with that sweet story. Not super spooky, very sweet, but I hope you like it. If you like what you see, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel. We'll see you soon on the next Jaywalk.